Hello, everyone. My name is Samia Ashraf. I'm a Flutter developer, a GDE, and also a Women Techmakers ambassador. And in today's session, I will be talking about how you can write native APIs in Flutter using the platform channels. So, this is going to be a part two because I have one with GDG Meena where I talked about how you can use the native APIs. So, in this session, we are going to dive in a bit deeper and look at how you can write the native APIs. So, let's discuss our agenda for today. So, today we will be talking about what are native APIs and why do we need them. Second, we will go on to see how native code integration, what are the native code integration options. And finally, we will look at an example and see how it all works together. So, let us begin with native APIs. So, the reason why native APIs exist is because Flutter is a cross platform framework, which means that you can write code and you can build applications that will work on multiple platforms. So, which also means that if you want to access something for one platform, let's say for Android, if you want to access some of the device features or the system features, then it is not feasible to do it with Flutter because remember Flutter is a cross-platform application. So one code is going to work for all of the platforms. But let's say you want to dive in deeper and get some information about the Android device. So in that case, we are going to use something called as the native APIs. Now, native APIs exist because this the code that you write, it's going to be platform specific, which means if I write some code like native code for Android, then that code is not going to work for iOS. It's only and only going to work for Android. So that is the difference between the native code or platform specific code and your regular Flutter code. Flutter code is going to run on all of the platforms, but your platform specific code is going to be specific to one platform. So, platform specific code that is written in the native language of the platform, which is Java or Kotlin for Android, and Objective C or Swift for iOS, is to interact with the Flutter framework. So, now the way it works is you will not be writing a separate application. You will be integrating all of that in Flutter, and with the help of Flutter, you're going to um, make the platform code talk with the device. So this native code is then integrated into a Flutter project using the platform channels, which will then allow communication between the Flutter code base and the native platform specific code. So to just to give you an overview, this is let's say this is our client app, the Flutter app, and then we have the iOS host and an Android host. So two platforms with whom we want to communicate using the platform specific code. So the way it works with iOS host is we're going to use something called Flutter method channel that is going to talk between that is going to help you in communicating between the Flutter app and the iOS host. And in iOS host, we have something called as app delegate. And this is the one that is going to exchange the messages between the iOS and the third party APIs for iOS. So whenever you write the code for iOS using the Flutter View controller, the exchange of the messages will happen and you're going to get the response. So similarly for Android, in activity, we will be using the Flutter view and exchanging messages between the Android platform APIs and the third party APIs for Android. So using method channel, we are going to communicate between our Flutter app and the iOS or the Android, the native app. So that was a quick overview on native APIs. So let me give you now an example of where you can use this. So now we know that when you write native code, that is only going to work for that particular platform. So let's say I want to I want to get the battery percentage of my device, and let's say my device is Android. So I need to write a code such that my Android device understands that it has to pull out the battery percentage from the device. So that same code is not going to work for iOS because iOS was designed in a different way. It has its own code of extracting the battery percentage. So in this case, you can use the native APIs. And also the a second example would be if you want to make the if you want to do some device configurations. Let's say you're using a plugin or you're using a package which requires some native configuration, then in that case also some of the plugins will require you sorry some of the packages will require you to write some extensive native code to for the for your device to understand. So that was about the native APIs. So now let us look at what are the integration options, the native code integration options. So we have four types. We have platform channels, we have method channels, event channels, and plugins. So what are the four different ways in which you can integrate the native code into the Flutter app? So first one is using the platform channels. Now, communication between the Flutter and the native code is done using asynchronous method calls. So we are going to look at an example later on. And the second type is the method channels, where messages between the Flutter and the native code is done using the synchronous method calls. So basically, it's trying to tell you that if when you're trying to communicate between a Flutter app and a native app, then you're using the platform channels, which uses asynchronous method calls, and the method channel uses the synchronous method calls to pass the messages between the Flutter and the native code. In this way, when the communication is done, only then you will be getting the possible output, because when you write the platform specific code, Flutter also has to understand what it has to do with that code. So let's say in my I have a widget called as home page, and in my home page I'm trying to get the battery percentage of my Android device, and I write the code for that, the native code. So how is Flutter going to know that what it has to do with that code? That is done using the platform and the method channels. So platform here is asynchronous. It uses asynchronous method calls, and the method channels uses synchronous method calls. So when we explore with the example, you'll get a better idea. And the third option is the event channels, which sends the events from the native code to Flutter and vice versa. So obviously, when the connection is established between the Flutter app and the native app, then the messages will have to be passed, right? So when I request for the battery percentage from my Flutter app to my Android app will also is going to respond, and it's going to pass the message or the data that I'm looking for. So that is done using the event channels. So just like get battery percentage, so that can be an event channel which is going to get the battery my device's battery percentage from the Flutter app, from the Android app back to my Flutter app so that I can display it in the UI. And finally, we have the plugins. So to leverage pre-built plugins to access native functionality without writing platform specific code. So let's say I want to write some code which for which there is no package in pub.dev. So let's say something, so we have almost everything in pub.dev, but let's just assume that there is no package in pub.dev to get the device's features. There is one, we all know that, but I'm just giving you an example. If such a thing does not exist, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a Flutter app, and I'm going to write the platform specific code for that use case, where the code that I write is going to extract the device features and it is going to pass to the Flutter app. Now, this becomes a plugin because I have Flutter code and I also have Android code in this. So, in this way, I can use this plugin to in my different projects to get the device features. So basically, this is trying to tell you how you can inject native code in your Flutter app. So the fourth option here is plugins. Plugins. So usually, when you're using the packages in pub.dev, let's say the device info package. So if you ever head over to their repository and check the code, you will notice that there is a lot of native code that's there in that package. That is because they have previously written that code and converted it into a package so that you can use it in your Flutter projects. So that was all about the native code integration. I'm now going to head to my VS Code where I'm going to show you a quick example of how you can write native code. So this is a very simple example where you're going to get the battery's percentage from your device. So we are going to explore both for Android as well as for iOS. So it all starts with my app, which calls my homepage. And notice here I have a method channel. Now, if you go back to our um definition of what is a method channel, it says it is used to pass the messages between your Flutter and the native code using the synchronous method calls. So this here method channel is going to help us in passing the messages between our Flutter app and the Android device using the platform specific code for Android. So this method channel here, um, it's going to take a name, a string name. Now, what is the string name? This string name is the name of that method. So in my case, it's going to be battery. It's going to be samples.flutter.dev/battery. Now you will notice that I have something like an application ID here, or you can say a method ID. This is because in your Flutter app, every method should have a unique name. I cannot have two method channels with the same name, that is battery and battery. It has to be two separate names. That's why it's always a good practice to precede it with an application ID. So, a method channel with the name samples.flutter.dev/battery. And what it does is it creates a method channel with this specified name. So now, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a string battery level, call it as battery level, so that whenever I receive the output from the um, the platform code, I can store it in this string and then display it in the UI. So let's head over to our widget. It's a very simple widget with just an elevated button. So if you see this, so let me just run it. And if you see this, it's just a button that says get battery level. And the text here initially is going to be unknown battery level because I haven't called the method yet. And when I click on this on press, what happens is I get the battery level. So now let's look at how the communication is being established. So if I hover on this, so if I click on this, so get battery level is going to invoke the platform. It's going to invoke the method get battery level, and this is nothing but the method channel that we um, defined earlier. So, and then it's going to store the result in result. So now let us look at what does this platform do, or the method. So if you head over to So in my project, I have chosen the Java code, and I have written all of the platform specific code for Android in main activity.java. Of course, you can use the Kotlin code as well. So here I have my method, which is the samples.flutter.dev slash battery. Remember, I told you that this name has to be a unique one. So this method is being defined here. So let's look at what it does. Now, here what it does is it's going to call the method get battery level. So this is a predefined, we can almost say that this is a predefined method that already exists, and what it does is it gets the battery level of Android. So the get battery level, once it gets the device's battery, it stores in an integer variable called battery level, and this battery level, so we have it here. um, yeah, so when after it returns the battery level from this particular function, it's going to store it in this battery level, and then we are going to do some check. But before that, let us look at what does the get battery level do. So the get battery level is going to is going to use the battery manager, where it's going to get, so this is exactly what I can call as the proper native code, because here it's going to dive in deeper to the battery manager, and then it is going to extract the system's battery. So battery property capacity is what is used to extract the battery percentage, and then it is stored in the battery level. So it does its own thing in converting it to an integer property, and then stores it in battery level. Now, obviously, we'll need to do some checks on the version here. Now, if you're running on let's say a lower version, then it would be, what it would do is it's going to write a different code, because obviously with every platform there will be some updates. So but both the things, what it does here is it gets the battery and it returns the battery level, which that then gets stored in battery level. And then this thing is going to be this property will then be returned to the Flutter side of the app, from where we are going to display it into the UI. So so this is going to be in battery level, where we are going to store it in our main variable. So then when I call this, what happens is it's going to display the battery. Now, if you're using an emulator, you can check if this is correct or not by just heading over to battery, and then just play around with the battery percentage. And if I set it to 41 percentage, it's going to update itself. So you can manually control here the battery percentage. So that was about our Android app. Now let us look at how we can write the platform specific code for the iOS side. So I have chosen the Swift language, but obviously you can go ahead with the Objective C. So here, remember earlier we had the method channel. So this time we're going to have the Flutter method channel. And if you had noticed this diagram here, the method channel used on the iOS host is Flutter method channel, and the one used on the Android is just a method channel. So that's why it's Flutter method channel here. And again, I'm going to use the same string here. The string is your method channel's name has to be the same for iOS and for Android, same as in the one that you had defined here or declared here, and the output of which is going to be stored here. So let's see how In iOS, the percentage battery percentage is going to be extracted. So we're going to call a function called as receive battery level. Now, what this does is this again enters the battery state, UI device dot battery state, and it is going to return. So if so here so we'll have one issue when you're using a simulator will not really respond to any of your method channels. And if you try to ask uh, the iPhone's percentage or your iOS simulator's percentage, it's just going to say battery level not available. That is because it's only going to run on the real iOS devices, the physical iOS devices, and not on the simulators. But we can definitely check that as well. So let me quickly open up a simulator. But if you were to test this on a physical device, everything will work well and it is going to return to you the percentage. You just run from main.dart. Whatever is the percentage is then going to be returned, and then it is going to. So again we have this get battery. Okay, so I have the iOS simulator open, and now let's try to. So initially it says unknown battery level. That is because we haven't called it, and this value is coming from the default string that we have here. So let me now call get battery level, and now it says failed to get battery level not available. So that is coming from this message because it will not run on a simulator. And like I said, if you want to experience that, you can use a physical device and test it for yourself. So again, the method name here is get battery level, just like the one that we had in Android. But you will notice that the way we are approaching, it's the same method name, but the way we are approaching is completely different. So that is how you can write platform specific code. And of course this is only for Android and iOS. We also have for Windows and Mac OS, Linux, and everything. So definitely do check this out. And also, native code is something which you are going to use a lot as you progress in your career, because as the projects become more and more complex, it is going to require you to play around with the native configurations and add some extra native configurations just so that your app can be more advanced. And so yeah, definitely do check this out. I'm sure at some point you are going to come across this. So, and Flutter has excellent documentation on how to write native code. So from there, and then as you level here, get battery level, and so that is something you can do next time you are writing a code. Sorry, I had some internet connection issues. But yeah, so I was just telling that at any point in your career, you're going to come across native APIs. So definitely do give it a read. Flutter has some excellent documentation on native APIs, and you can start from there. And as you become more comfortable with the documentation, you can explore with more and more examples. Like one of the examples can be get device features. So yeah, so once you have explored this example, do check out device information, and we can also have it as another session where we can write the native code for device features. And yeah, so definitely do give it a read. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. And yeah, thank you for joining in today. Any questions, anyone? If you have any questions, I'm sure platform channels, native code, it's very difficult to get started. But once you understand how you need to do it, you will definitely get the hang of it. So definitely do reach out to me if you have any questions. So my social links are shared in the chat in the comment section. So yeah, any questions regarding how to get the where you can find mainactivity.java or app delegate. And also in Google, if you just type in right platform specific code, it's you can start reading from there. It's simple to get started. So thank you everyone for joining, and hoping to see you in the next sessions also. Thank you.